Welcome to another information presentation for EDET 620 Educational Technology. The topic of this presentation is context and its role in the instructional process or its role in defining the instructional environment. And just a reminder that all of the information presentation sessions as well as course projects are designed to address the overall course goal, which is to help you learn the skills necessary to be able to answer the question, how can teachers use technology to improve their professional practice? Context is one of the areas that are found within the instructional aspect of using technology to improve teaching. Just a reminder that there are 4 distinct areas in the course in which the role of technology to improve teacher practice is addressed, and context falls into the instruction category. Another reminder that context represents a very important component of the overall instructional process or the instructional environment, and it's represented as one of the components within the instructional process, but context really addresses, influences, and affects all aspects of the instructional process. So it's not just one distinct component or element of instruction. Now, just a reminder that these information presentations are also found in written form in the course notes. And in the notes, when you read about instructional context, you read that context represents all the factors external to the learners within an instructional environment that provide meaning for the messages they receive within the instructional environment. And context represents all those factors that influence and define what, when, where, how, why, and with whom individual learners learn from instruction. Now, for the sake of learning about instructional contexts and learning about the role that technology plays within instructional contexts, the different types of contexts are represented in 3 distinct categories for this presentation. There are creation-oriented contexts, problem-solving contexts, and real or simulated contexts. And from the graphic, what's communicated is that there's a lot of overlap between these different context types, and the notes and the information presented in the notes describe and represent some more distinct instructional contexts that fall within these overlapping sections. Now, just to address these 3 distinct context areas in more detail, creation represents contexts in which the learners make stuff. And this is one of the greatest assets that technology can play in the instructional process as far as I'm concerned, because there are so many different ways in which learners can use technology to create things. For example, you're probably familiar with Wikipedia, and Wikipedia represents a user-created encyclopedia. And there was an article recently in the the Washington Post. It was probably in the Times too. But there was an article in the Post about how there was a college course in technical writing where the students had to create Wikipedia entries as part of their technical writing abilities. And that act of creation, it's also a reel. It could fit into the reel category because they're actually making something that is used in the real world. But this act of creation represents a really interesting context because it's actually rather difficult to get writings now to be published in Wikipedia, because there is a lot of peer editing and reviewing that goes on. So, but in this case, the instructor was using Wikipedia as a context for creating things. Another great example of creation is something online called the Morse Guide, and this is a Wikispaces site. That is, it's a website that was created actually by some teachers at the Morse School. And it's a website designed to help orient new students to the school, to the overall culture of the school. And all of the entries on the different pages were created by the third grade class. And so they have profiles of the teachers, the playground rules, what to expect at lunch, some really interesting and informative aspects of going to the Morse School that can really help to ease the transition for new students into the school. And it was, again, created by the third grade class. And so this is another example of using technology to create things. Another terrific example of using technology to create things is something called the ThinkQuest Challenge, sponsored by Oracle. And if you go to thinkquest.org, you can access different projects that the students have made. And this is a contest in which groups of students from different schools work together to create educational websites to be used by other students. And some of the websites that are created are very sophisticated and complex. And again, if you imagine the types of skills that are learned or applied in this act of creation, you can really see the value of this type of learning context. So I encourage you to go out to thinkquest.org and examine some of those sites. Another category of context represents real or simulated contexts, and to be honest, almost all of the examples provided for the creation-oriented aspect of using technology to define contexts, those examples could also fit into the real or simulation category too. One example that I love of using technology to define real contexts is the Virginia Save Our Streams project, and you can Google this project and get the website for it. But this is a site that supports the training and data collection for individuals to monitor local streams, to monitor things like water quality and the effects of water quality on living organisms. And the data that users submit at this website is actually used to help monitor and profile the health of waterways in Virginia. And this information is then used to help look at patterns of pollution effects and other aspects of human impact on the health of waterways. And so if you go to this website, you can learn more about how students could become qualified monitors and collect data and actually and contribute to a scientific endeavor. And so this is just a good example of using technology to help define a real context, because in this case the students are operating as real environmental scientists in the world. And finally, there is the problem-solving category of contexts. And one really good example that you are going to be investigating for this particular project is something called web quests. And web quests are simple problem-based learning environments that are designed by teachers that involve the students in trying to solve a problem, and they are provided with resources that are all web-based resources. And you're going to learn more about WebQuests for this upcoming project. So the WebQuests represent a form of problem-based learning, and WebQuest environments represent problem-solving related instructional contexts. And again, I want to encourage you to look at the course notes and examine the information that's represented in the notes regarding the 3 different major categories of learning contexts that can be defined or at least supported by technology. And again, there are examples of specific context types that fall into the different categories as well as the overlapped categories. And you can read more about these in the course notes as well. So as mentioned, this particular project that you are about to become involved in asks you to evaluate some WebQuests, and so you're going to learn more about this particular type of learning context, a problem-based or problem-solving related learning context. And in the process, you're going to be reflecting on some of the important ways in which technology might be used to define contexts that provide meaning and purpose to learning specific skills in an instructional experience.